Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. We will start immediately. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. Let us start. Thank you very much. I will speak in Arabic, so please you set your headset. Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. Let us start. Delegates, thank you very much.
Distinguished delegates, may peace of God fall upon all of you, and good morning to all of you. I would like to start this meeting and to welcome all of you to the 35th meeting of the parties to the Montreal Protocol in Nairobi, the seat of the Secretariat. I would like also to welcome in particular Mrs. Inger Anderson, UNEP ED. We welcome her presence here today. I would like also to welcome Dr. Ruslinda Toya, the Minister of Environment, Climate Change and the Forestry of the Republic of Kenya. We welcome you all here this morning. Before we start our meeting, we will be pleased to watch a cultural performance by Safari Cats dancers.
Asemova imakondera usemaingira ungole mashanga ibakwa usemainga la stoninga ya usemakenda ule makolo boyenga shema ule pongwa ila usemayenga se namu maling, uni makwado shongo, makolobo, ilaba swinga, sing, mikau. Quincy Maha. Shit.
أشكر
On your behalf, I would like to thank the Safari Cat dancers. I thank them very much for this amazing and excellent performance from the depth of Africa. Now, I would like to invite the Executive Director of UNEP, Mrs. Inger Anderson, to deliver her statement. Madam, you have the floor.
Excellencies, with the energy that we just saw displayed, I know that that same energy is amongst this group, the distinguished delegates to this MOP. And to Madam Minister Tuya, what a pleasure it is to have our host country present on the high podium. To all excellencies and friends, a warm welcome to Kenya, the home of the United Nations Environment Programme, the proud home here in beautiful Kenya since 1972. This 35th meeting of the parties to the Montreal Protocol is part of a growing emergence of Nairobi as an environmental hub, something we at UNEP are very proud of. A hub that unites action across the triple planetary crisis, that crisis of climate change, the crisis of nature and biodiversity loss, and the crisis of pollution and waste. And MOP35 here comes just on the heels of another important meeting that we held of the Convention on Biological Diversity just a week ago, 2 weeks ago, just before next month's negotiations that will be here on plastic at INC3, and right ahead of the 6th United Nations Environment Assembly, where we seek effective, inclusive, and sustainable multilateral actions across the triple planetary crisis. This Montreal Protocol is, of course, a hugely important part of this united action. In fact, this agreement has been a trailblazer for over 3 decades, as you well know. And as you know, the Montreal Protocol has protected human health and ecosystems by phasing out harmful ozone-depleting substances. And the protocol has delivered huge climate benefits, which we keep repeating in many places. And many of the substances were also greenhouse gases, and of course ecosystems that this treaty has protected now today store carbon that would otherwise be in the atmosphere. So my thanks to all delegates and those who have gone before you over these 3 decades for all this hard work. I also would like to express my thanks to members of the assessment panel of the Montreal Protocol. Let me appreciate Paul Newman and John Pyle in particular, and the 2 SAP co-chairs for whom this is their last meeting, and Keishi Onishi, co-chair of the Medical and Chemicals Committee, who's also leaving. The 2022 quadrennial assessment report, the reports the panel have produced, raised important emerging issues for the protocol to address, such as the increasing HFC-23, the very short-lived substances, and some CFCs in the atmosphere, and addressing the feedstock uses of controlled substances that are exempted from the controls. The significance of N2O as ozone-depleting substance not controlled by the protocol is also increasing. So these emerging issues demonstrate the importance of science, and they show how the Montreal Protocol delivers impact beyond its mandate. These findings, as well as the Montreal Protocol assessment process itself, are linked with important UNEP-led processes, such as the Global Environmental Outlook, or GEO7, an important UNEP assessment on the need for caution around geoengineering, and negotiations on the Science Policy Panel on Chemicals, Waste and Pollution. So the Montreal Protocol's assessment processes itself influences these other processes that are underway. So friends, you have indeed achieved much. And my distinguished friend and chair from Bahrain mentioned to me earlier that indeed the reason why this is so is because you are not just fellow travelers and negotiators, you've also created a community of family committed to the Montreal Protocol. And so as you have the day before you packed, there is a lot more to be done, and this we know. So please allow me to mention 3 out of the many challenges that I believe you can meet. I take that liberty, having been given this podium. And the first issue that I believe you can meet is a decisive replenishment of the Montreal Protocol, multilateral fund. The funding estimate for the 24 to 26 triennium at $1 billion is the highest in history, and with good reason. These funds are needed to support action on phasing out hydrochlorofluorocarbons, as well as phasing down hydrofluorocarbons themselves, the latter of which is a central goal, as we all know, of the Kigali Amendment, and crucial to slowing climate change. I ask that you deliver a decisive decision on the issue of replenishment. My second ask should not come as a surprise. I ask for full ratification of the Kigali Amendment. A strong decision on funding will increase the confidence and bolster ratifications of the Kigali Amendment. And make no mistake, we are aiming for universal ratification, the power of which was demonstrated during the phase down of ozone-depleting substances. As of earlier this month, 43 nations still had not ratified Kigali Amendment, and regardless of what happens with this replenishment, I call on every nation that has not yet done so to close this critical gap by ratifying the amendment. And my third ask is to push hard on energy efficiency. We know where the world stands on climate change. Climate impacts are becoming more frequent, more intense, and more deadly every year, and it is often the very poorest or those who have contributed the very least to climate change who suffer the most. And at the same time, global efforts to cut greenhouse gas emissions under the Paris Agreement are still not strong enough. As a result, the Kigali Amendment is becoming ever more important. Yes, phasing down HFCs could avoid warming of up to 0.5 degrees by 2100, which would be a huge win. But you have the chance to double these benefits by taking advantage of the shift to new gases, to design cooling equipment that is more efficient in its energy usage. You held a workshop on this issue prior to this COP, and you discussed how this is not just about slowing climate change. You clearly indicated that it is about the need to increase the availability of and the access to affordable and sustainable cooling, all the more important as the world will heat up, so that we can protect vulnerable communities against intense heat and reduce food losses across the value chain in developing countries. So I ask you to seize this opportunity with both hands. I would also like to draw your attention to the Global Cooling Pledge, which is being championed by the United Arab Emirates and will feature at COP28. This pledge intends to raise the ambition through targets on reducing cooling-related emissions, improving energy efficiency alongside the HFC phase-down, and increasing access to sustainable cooling. Achieving the pledge's target would cut emissions by approximately 78 million tons of CO2 equivalent between 2022 and 2050, and thereby improving the lives of hundreds of millions of people and realize, frankly, huge financial savings for governments. So it should be a self-evident step up. UNEP is supporting this pledge through the Cool Coalition, and as such, I ask everyone to consider joining the pledge and mobilizing your peers to do so on the road to COP28. Friends, I know that we are asking a lot of you, but you, the parties, have shown again and again that you are up to the task. You know how much we hold up the Montreal Protocol as an example to other conventions and treaties. When I attended the negotiations for the new global framework on chemicals in Bonn just a few weeks ago, where, by the way, a very ambitious agreement was indeed gabbled, and of which we are very proud, I told the chemical and manufacturer reticent to change their business models to look to the cooling industry for inspiration, because the cooling industry has realigned. And I will make the same point next month at Nairobi, here in Nairobi, to INC3, when negotiations on the zero draft of the legally binding treaty or agreement to end plastic pollution will begin. We can make shifts, and this protocol shows how to do so, and how to do it with regulatory directions, with inclusion of what is possible, and with an open and trusting MOP. When industries use chemicals that kill and make people sick or harm the planet or damage their own long-term profits, they have to change. It's a case of adapt or, frankly, die. And nations and industries under the Montreal Protocol have shown the benefits of embracing but also driving change. So I ask that you keep leading the way. Pass strong decisions this week. Show the world how multilateralism is done, and done right, and deliver big. And ensure that the Montreal Protocol continues to protect people and planet, and be that shining example for what multilateralism can deliver. In closing, let me extend my deep thanks to the chair and president of this MOP period for extraordinary leadership, and wish all the very best to the incoming chair. I thank you.
أشكر المديرة التنفيذية السيدة إنجر أندرسون.
Thank you very much, Madam Executive Secretary, for those significant remarks. I would like to call upon the parties to follow her recommendations. It's my great honor now to invite Madam Rosalinda Soipan-Tuya, Minister of Environment, Climate Change and Forestry of the Republic of Kenya, to address this meeting. Honorable Minister, you have the floor.
Excellency Hassan Mubarak, President of the 34th meeting of parties, Honorable Excellency Ministers, my sister Inga Anderson, the UNEP Executive Director, Excellencies Ambassadors and High Commissioners, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I would like to welcome you all to Nairobi, Kenya, and also congratulate the Safari Cats. They didn't they do a splendid performance? But just a word of caution to myself and every one of us, we should not try some of those tactics at home. But they by all means did a very good performance. Once again, we are honored to be hosting the headquarters of the United Nations Environment Program. We are very proud of this, and I'm really delighted that this MOP is happening right here. UNEP being the only UN headquarters in the Global South, and also proud that we are host to the Ozone Secretariat, and we continue to support the efforts pushed by the Executive Director, that we continue to support UNEP to make it a solid hub for all environmental initiatives in the globe over. Mr. President, Kenya expresses its strong commitment to meet its obligations under international law. We do not only seek to be a leader in that front of meeting our international obligations and climate action ambitions, but we are also happy to work in collaboration with other state parties to ensure the protection, conservation, and management of the global environment for intergenerational equity and sustainable development. Kenya supports the successful implementation of the Montreal Protocol. I am happy to announce that Kenya has ratified the Kigali Amendment, being the 153rd party to ratify the amendment, which enters into force on 21st December 2020. At this point, I'd like to encourage those parties that have not yet ratified the Kigali Amendment to do so as soon as is practicable to help the globe meet the aspirations of the protocol. We are all aware that the Kigali Amendment was adopted for the gradual reduction in the consumption and production of hydrofluorocarbons. If the state parties effected this, we would avoid as much as half a degree Celsius of warming by the end of the century, given that HFCs are such potent greenhouse gases. Kenya has put in place strategies that would assist in addressing issues of HFCs. And as part of the strategies to face down HFCs with high global warming potentials, the ministry that I head, the Ministry of Environment, Climate Change and Forestry, in collaboration with the United Nations Environment Programme, Compliance Assistance Programme, and GIZ Proclima of the German government with funding from the government of France, has so far trained 200 customs officers and over 1,000 refrigeration and air conditioning technicians on control measures of ozone-depleting substances, imports and exports, and safe use of hydrocarbons and other natural refrigerants as substitutes to HFCs, respectively. Ladies and gentlemen, time is not on our side to tame global warming. The COVID-19 pandemic slowed our responses and interventions with regard to actions and activities that would protect the ozone layer. We need to make progress in this meeting of parties, given it is the second meeting of the parties to be held in person after the COVID-19 pandemic. The pandemic brought a lot of challenges in almost all sectors of life, including economic, social, health, among others. And now that it has come under control, I hope that there are lessons learned to be able to do better in future to avoid potential negative impacts from such occurrences. In this regard, the issues that I hope that we can agree on as state parties during this session include decisions around the levels of replenishment of the multilateral fund that assists developing countries to implement their obligations under the Montreal Protocol. I'm also hoping that we shall be able to arrive at concrete strategies on the impact, to assess the impact of COVID-19, which has affected the baseline consumption of hydrofluorocarbons, substances controlled under the Kigali Amendment. I'm also hopeful that discussions here will center around destruction technologies for controlled substances, as well as energy efficient technologies and the need for stoppage of dumping of obsolete technologies. Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, as a country, we have also made comprehensive progress in phasing out the ozone-depleting substances in most applications. We have continuously undertaken awareness and capacity building programs for the large, medium, and small-scale enterprises on alternatives to ODS, in particular hydrochlorofluorocarbons. This is in line with Kenya's belief in multilateralism and that the implementation of the protocol, together with its well-established funding mechanisms and cooperation among parties, the healing of the ozone layer will be achieved within the set time frame. You may recall that while adjusting the Montreal Protocol to accelerate the phase-out of HCFCs, the meeting of parties decided to encourage the use of low global warming potential substitutes. This was done to reduce the penetration and consumption of HFCs as substitutes to HCFCs, as well as emphasize energy-efficient alternatives. However, some of the most important aspects that are of concern to Kenya and other developing countries include reliable, available, energy-saving, affordable, and accessibility to ozone-friendly alternatives that are also climate-friendly. These concerns are informed by the fact that Kenya has in the past experienced natural disasters linked to climate change. The consequences of climate change are so alive to our populace since we have lost not only lives, but livelihoods as well. It is for these national reasons, if not for our global obligations, that our government seeks mutual agreement and consensus with the global community to adopt ozone-friendly technologies as well as climate-friendly alternatives. Kenya believes that acknowledging synergies with other multilateral environment agreements that address challenges posed by alternatives to ozone-depleting substances would strengthen the Montreal Protocol. Kenya has taken proactive steps to implement the controlled substances regulations, which have been reviewed to encompass HFCs. It is important to mention that we have also developed and launched the National Cooling Action Plan, as urged by the United Nations Secretary General during the World Ozone Day commemoration on 16 September 2019. The objective, as we all know, of the action plan is to enhance access to sustainable cooling as a climate action intervention. You are also all aware that cooling is one of the biggest contributors to global warming, and it uses refrigerants that are controlled by the protocol. Thus, there is a great need to target reducing emissions, improving energy efficiency, and climate-friendly actions to cooling. And I am glad that this would be there will be an important opportunity in the upcoming COP28 to advance these discussions. As I conclude, we are aware as a country that financial assistance to Article 5 parties has contributed to the successful implementation of the Montreal Protocol. The use of the multilateral fund has assisted in the phase-out of ozone-depleting substances under phase-out projects approved by the Executive Committee following the control measures under the protocol schedules. Now that the Kigali Amendment has been adopted to phase down HFCs, Kenya would like to appeal that the MLF continues to assist Article 5 parties in order to fulfill their obligations under the protocol. Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, with these remarks, I would once again like to thank all the delegates and the Ozone Secretariat for a very well-organized 35th meeting of the parties of the Montreal Protocol. And I wish you the very best in the remaining deliberations. And I wish to congratulate His Excellency, the sitting President, for a splendid steering of the meeting of the parties, the 34th meeting of the parties, and congratulate the incoming President, and wish you all a very good stay here in Nairobi, feel at home. And Mr. President was telling me that he has not had a chance at a safari experience. I'm sure he will find another time to do that. But remember that you are in Nairobi. We have the national park right a few kilometers from this UNEP headquarters, and it is not fenced. So you might encounter some real cats, not the safari cats that were dancing here. You might encounter the lions and that category of cats. Please don't pet them. Don't go near them because they are wild. But enjoy the experience of Nairobi. We are happy to be hosting you. Thank you very much.
شكرا لمعالي الوزيرة على هذه الكلمة القيمة.
Thank you, Minister, so very much for your important presentation and for all of the efforts carried out by Kenya. We would like to pay tribute to the people and the government of Kenya for their very warm welcome for the participants to this conference. Please allow me now, as the outgoing president of the meeting of the parties, to make a few remarks.
السيدة إنجر أندرسون المديرة التنفيذية.
Thank you so much, Executive Director Inga Anderson, for the Montreal Protocol. Madam Rosalind Soipan Tuya, Minister of Environment, Climate Change and Forestry of the Republic of Kenya. Madam Megumi Seki, Secretary of the Ozone Protocol. All participants here. I would like to welcome you to this 35th meeting of the parties of the Montreal Protocol here in Nairobi, Kenya. The first in-person meeting at the headquarters of UNEP for a number of years. Over the last few years, the last few days, we have worked extremely hard during this conference with the 71st meeting of the committee following the Bureau meeting on Saturday, the working group on energy efficiency on Sunday, and on Monday, delegates have worked on the extremely heavy agenda under the presidency of the two co-chairs. I would like to thank them both very much. I'd also like to thank all of the parties for their spirit of compromise that they have demonstrated over the last few days. We have made great progress in our work, particularly since the OEWG, which took place in Bangkok, including the contact groups looking at issues relating to TEEP and the supplementary report which was provided, which took into account the 27 recommendations made, including different scenarios. In Bangkok, we have dwelt as well upon the reports, the quadrennial reports, and 5 main questions have been discussed under the any other matters point on the agenda, including the emissions of HFC 23, the changes in the list of techniques which are adopted, and the management of refrigerant components. These have been anchored within the agenda and are part of the messages that we have received. Parties have been able to discuss the means of assessment of these matters to guarantee appropriate assessment as an important component of these decisions in such a way as to ensure sustainability. On behalf of all of the parties, I would like to pay tribute to the energy efficiency groups, working groups, and all of the contact groups within Montreal Protocol. The work of the Montreal Protocol has not been only studied during the meeting in Bangkok, but over the whole of the 45th OEWG. Meantime, other issues on the agenda relating to potential improvements have been examined, as well as gaps which need to be filled as we seek to eliminate ozone-depleting substances and the ways in which we can remediate to meet with the commitments of the Montreal Protocol. We can observe that the parties have worked extremely hard in the open-ended working group and the MOP35, working from the ideas that came out of the previous meeting in Bangkok and the large quantity of documentation that we have before us. I would like to encourage you once again and to thank you for the great work achieved so far. Ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the fourth day of our meeting, MOP35. And I feel the weight of all of these lengthy hours that we have spent in negotiation. A very great thank you for your integrity, your sacrifice, your dedication. We encourage you to continue with the work that is still outstanding. As President of MOP34, after the Kigali Amendment adoption, 155 states have ratified the Kigali Amendment. There are only 43 states parties which have not yet ratified the Kigali Amendment, and we would like to encourage them to do so. Ladies and gentlemen, since this is the last time that I will be taking the floor as President of MOP34, I would like to thank you from the bottom of my heart for all of your hard work and for your support to me during my presidency, and to thank the members of the Bureau, the co-chairs, Barbados, Belgium, and from Czechia, and the rapporteur from Kenya for their sincere cooperation. Allow me to thank as well the Secretariat for their constant support throughout. In conclusion, it's a great honor for me to hand over the responsibility to the new president. May the peace of God be with you. Thank you.
والآن سأعطي الفرصة للسيدة إنجر ومعالي الوزير.
I will now give the opportunity to Madam Inga Anderson and Madam Zorages to leave the plenary, and we will take up our work in a few minutes.
المندوبون أصحاب السعادة.
Ladies and gentlemen, I would invite you to once again take your seats.
Please take your seats. سنشرع الآن في انتخاب أعضاء مكتب.
We are now going to move on to the election of the members of the Bureau of the 35th meeting of the parties to the Montreal Protocol. This will be done in accordance with Rule 21 of the Rules of Procedure. The 35th meeting of the parties must elect a president, 3 vice presidents and a rapporteur. Based on the principle of regional rotation, agreed to by the parties may wish to elect a party from the group of the Eastern European states to preside over the 35th meeting of the parties, and to elect a party from the group of Asia-Pacific states as rapporteur. The parties may also wish to elect 3 vice presidents, 1 each from the groups of the African states, the Latin American and Caribbean states, and the Western European and other states. Informal consultations were held by the regional groups with respect to the election of the new Bureau. I am informed that those consultations have reached consensus among the various groups regarding the nominations of their representatives in the new Bureau. The relevant groups have nominated Ms. Azra Rogovic-Grubic from Bosnia and Herzegovina for President, representing the European Union states. Apologies, the Eastern European states. The 3 nominated vice presidents are Salah from Senegal, representing the African states, His Excellency Adrian R. Ford from Barbados, representing the Latin American and Caribbean states. And then Mr. Philippe Chamouni from Canada, representing the Western European and other states. For rapporteur, the nominated representative is Mr. Mohammed Abdul Saeed from Saudi Arabia, who will be representing the Asia-Pacific states. I would like to suggest that the nominated candidates for the election to the Bureau of the 35th meeting of the parties be elected by acclamation.
سيلشيس، هل ترغب بأخذ الكلمة أم بالخطأ تم ضغط الزر؟
Was there a request for the floor, or was that a mistake? Seychelles, did you ask for the floor?
بالخطأ، إن كان بالخطأ فأرجو.
Seychelles, did you ask for the floor?
Oh, really, it was a mistake.
Okay, thank you very much.
Who pressed it?
إذن لا أرى اعتراض على المرشح.
I therefore see no objections to these nominated candidates. Therefore, they're approved, and we move forward with the Bureau elected. It is now my honor before passing on the presidency to my colleague to really thank you for all of your support, for all of your trust. It's been a great honor to work during all these years as president of the 34th meeting of the parties to the Montreal Protocol. I will now officially invite the incoming president to join me at the podium to take up her functions.
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished delegates, good morning to all of you, and as incoming President, I would like to thank the representative of Bahrain, my good friend, Mr. Hassan Mubarak, as the outgoing President for his great service to the parties as a President of MOP34, and to thank all parties for the trust and confidence you have shown by electing me as a President of this meeting. I will count on your support and cooperation throughout the meeting. I would like also to thank to UNEP Secretariat for the great organization of this meeting, and also to Government of Kenya for excellent hospitality. Would like to thank to Her Excellency Rosalind Saipan-Tuya and Ms. Inger Andersen for their inspiring and encouraging messages. Now we had Spain asking for the floor, but is it Spain, do you want to have floor? We had at a certain moment shown that you are asking for the floor. No. Okay. Thank you very much. And now we will proceed to the agenda item 2B, which is adoption of the agenda of the high-level segment of the 35th meeting of the parties of Montreal Protocol. We have already completed agenda item 1 on opening the meeting, as well as item 2A on election of officers. I would like to proceed with agenda item 2B, adoption of the agenda. I invite meeting to turn to the provisional agenda for the high-level segment contained in section 2 of document Pro 35/1. Before we adopt this agenda, I would like to draw your attention to agenda item 8 on other matters. If there are any other matters that parties would like to discuss during the high-level segment, I would request that they be raised now. So now is the moment if any party wish to raise issue under agenda item 8, other matters. So far, I've seen none are raised. So the agenda will be adopted as contained in document Pro 35/1, section 2, with the understanding that there will be no other matters to be discussed under item 8. So if you agree, we can adopt the agenda as it stands. So by this, agenda is adopted. Thank you very much. As for the organization of work, it is our agenda item 2C. And in terms of organization of our work, we propose to start with agenda item 3 and to hear a presentation from the assessment panels on their synthesis report of the 2022 quadrennial assessment. As you can see on the slides, we will then move to agenda item 4 to hear a brief presentation by the chair of the Executive Committee of the Multilateral Fund on the work of the Executive Committee, the Fund Secretariat, and the Fund's implementing agencies. The plan is that we achieve this by lunchtime, lunch break, and after lunch we will begin consideration of agenda item 5, and we will be hearing statements by the heads of delegations. This item is expected to take up to Friday morning, desirably. On afternoon of the last session of our meeting, we will consider item 6 of the agenda, and we will hear the report of the co-chairs of the preparatory segment. Agenda item 7 on the date and venue of the 36th meeting of the parties will follow upon that. After that, we will move to agenda item 8 on other matters, which, no party raised other matters actually. And agenda item 9 is about adoption of decisions by the meeting. Before closing the meeting, we will consider agenda item 10 on the report of the meeting. So you can see all these suggestions sequence on the screens. At this point, I would like to make sure that the proposed organization of our works is acceptable to the meeting, and would like to hear if there are any comments or questions at this point in this regard. So, since it seems that this is acceptable way forward to all parties, and therefore I would like to draw your attention to agenda item 5 on statements by the heads of delegation. And as noted on the first day of the preparatory segment of the meeting on Monday, the Secretariat has been compiling the list of speakers based on requests by parties to make statements. We will go through the list based on first request, first speak, with understanding that ministers will be given priority. In that regard, and in order to be fair to all delegations, it will be imperative that statements will be limited to 5 minutes maximum. So please, 5 minutes maximum. I'm afraid that if statements go on for longer than this time limit, I will be in difficult position of having to interrupt and urge the speakers to finish up. But as by our tradition, I'm sure that we will make it each speaker within 5 minutes. And I would like to apologize in advance for any such intervention, because we simply want to ensure that all delegations that wish to speak, to make statements, can do so. If your delegation has not yet registered on the list of speakers and still wish to speak, I would request that you contact Ms. Jacqueline Nyanjui, the help desk, just outside this hall. Ms. Jackie is compiling the list of speakers, and if you have a written statement, please give her a hard copy of the statements or send the statement to her by email so that your statement can be shared with interpreters ahead of its delivery. Electronic copies of the statements will also be posted on the meeting portal, as usual. I would like to note that a preparatory segment of the meeting has not completed its work. As a result, some contact groups will at times be working in parallel with high-level segment. So it may be necessary for us to suspend the high-level segment at certain points to allow the preparatory segment to finalize its work. So I count on your patience and understanding in these instances. So with this, let us now move to the next item on the agenda, which is agenda item 2D, related to credentials of representatives. At this point, again, would ask all delegations who have not yet submitted their credentials to submit them to Ms. Jacqueline Nyanjui of the Ozone Secretariat at the help desk as soon as possible. The Bureau of this meeting will meet briefly early tomorrow morning, Friday, to review those credentials with the Secretariat and will report back to the parties on their status at an appropriate time during the day. The exact time and the room of the Bureau meeting will be announced later on the screens. So, once again, I would like to urge those parties that have not submitted yet the credentials, please submit them to Ms. Jacqueline Nyanjui of the Ozone Secretariat as soon as possible. So, with this, I will conclude our consideration of agenda item 2D for now. So we will be going back to this agenda item. And this brings us to agenda item 3, which is presentations by the assessment panels of their synthesis report on the 2022 quadrennial assessment. The co-chairs of the 3 Montreal Protocol assessment panels will present their synthesis report on the 2022 quadrennial assessment. I would like to invite the co-chairs of the protocols assessment panels to make their presentation. So please, distinguish, yes. And while they are getting ready to take the floor on behalf of all parties, I would really like to thank the assessment panels for their role in the protocol's implementation process and for the excellent reports they produce to enable the parties to take informed decisions. After the co-chair's presentation, we should be able to have a question and answer session. And yeah, let's wait for the co-chairs. So, thank you very much, distinguished member of assessment panels, co-chairs. I would like now to turn the floor over to you, and first we will have the reporting by SAP. So, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you again. This will be my last meeting of the parties, and I spoke a little bit on Monday, and I just want to say my thanks. It's been an honor and a privilege to have worked with all of you. Since it is my last meeting of the parties, and I now have the microphone on, and up here I think I can say whatever I want. I will refrain from that. I will also refrain from dancing for you. I also thought about that, but I don't think I can compete with them. So first of all, I want to tell you I'm speaking now for the Scientific Assessment Panel, the Environmental Effects Panel, and the Technology and Economics Assessment Panel. You can see we're listed here, David Fahey, myself, John Pyle, who isn't present. He had COVID and couldn't come, and Bonfils Safari, who's back here on my right. Finally, the Environmental Effects Panel, Paul Barnes, Janet Hornman, and Krishna Pandey, who is sitting behind me. And finally, the Technology and Economic Assessment Panel, Bella Moranian, who also could not come, but Marta Pisano here, and Ashley Woodcock. These are the 3 reports written by the panels. And I want to actually pause here for just a moment to remark on the cooperation that has occurred now between the panels. When I first arrived 16 years ago, there was a minimum amount of actual cross-collaboration between the 3 assessment panels, and that has changed very much for the positive. The SAP works very closely with the TEEP to look at, they produce bottom-up emission assessments, and we can compare them to our top-down emission assessments. And so this is a really positive thing. It allows us to look more carefully at the observations we get. It allows us to pose more careful questions to the TEEP. I think this is a very positive outcome. If you think of a Venn diagram, there's 3 big circles, and the 3 are intersecting quite well now. With the EAP, the SAP and the EAP now have a pretty close collaboration at looking at ozone and the impacts of ozone changes on surface UV. And so we've also established a much closer relationship to the EAP. And I think a lot of what's happened is because you delegates have asked us a lot of questions that cross between our 2 boundaries, or our 3 boundaries. So thank you for that. The synthesis report can be found on the portal. It's been translated. Here are the authors. We have to acknowledge Sarah Doherty from the SAP, Meg Secchi and Sophia Milone from the Secretariat. Meg is on my left, and I think Sophia is around here somewhere, so thanks to them for that. But we also have to acknowledge huge teams of people. There are a couple of hundred scientists who help the SAP. The TEEP and all of its talks are critical. The EAP and all the scientists behind the EAP are also. Without their help, we couldn't have composed these 3 reports. So let me launch into a few principal lessons here, a few principal findings. First of all, actions under the Montreal Protocol support the continued progress in consumer, commercial, industrial, agriculture, medical, and military sectors. ODSs, ozone-depleting substances, are no longer used in many applications worldwide. This is a remarkable thing. Actions taken under the Montreal Protocol have continued to decrease atmospheric abundances of ODSs and advance the recovery of stratospheric ozone. Just to show you this is a picture or a plot taken from the executive summary of the SAP report and included in the synthesis report. Total emissions, which is the top panel there, you can see the dates on the bottom running from the left to the right, from 1960 to the present and to the year 2100. You can see that emissions have drastically fallen from the peaks that we saw in the late 1980s. So total emissions have gone down quite a bit, and they continue to decline. Consequently, atmospheric chlorine and bromine levels. The bottom plot is a combination of chlorine and bromine that we see in the stratosphere. Those have also continued to decline, and you can see we project that to the year 2100, levels are projected to dramatically fall. Not back to 1960 levels yet, because the lifetimes of chlorofluorocarbons are quite long, but they're on the way down. Hydrofluorocarbons and the Kigali Amendment, 95% of future HFC use will be for refrigeration, and demand for that is increasing. They're powerful greenhouse gases. It's been said many times during the course of the week, and without these controls, there would be a large impact on climate. The planned phase down under the Kigali Amendment, as well as the country regulations, are driving industry towards lower GWP HFC alternatives or not-in-kind technologies, particularly in the RACHP and foam applications. And finally, if Kigali is fully implemented, it will almost completely mitigate the climate impact of HFCs. Again, another very positive message. This is just showing the hydrofluorocarbon emissions on the left, and on the right is the temperature impact of the HFCs. You can see the big blue shading there, that emissions were projected to go to very, very large levels. The initial Kigali amendment was shown in 2015. There's an orange line on there, so we could see that things were peaking in the late 2030s and then declining. Because of new both observations and new regulations, we now project the purple line. So things are going down. But there's also that dotted line on the bottom. If HFC emissions were stopped right now, you would have an even more dramatic improvement in terms of temperatures, perhaps as low as less than 1/100th of a degree impact if HFCs were fully controlled. And just to point out that currently global atmospheric abundances are still increasing. Let me move to another success story here, CFC11. Global CFC11 emissions declined after 2018 quite substantially, and they dropped to 45 plus or minus about 10 gigagrams in both 2019 and 2020. If you projected forward from the 2012-2013 period, you could see that the current emissions are about in line with what we would have expected from that point. So again, CFC11, it went up, but now it's back on the way down. Carbon tetrachloride. Abundances of carbon tetrachloride continue to decline. That's good. Oops. Decline rates are slower per year than we expect. We expect about a 3% decline per year if carbon tetrachloride was fully, if there were no emissions. But it's 1 to 2%, so it's a lot slower than we expect. So the emissions and the emission estimate on the bottom, you can see that the emissions remain above 30 gigagrams per year, closer in the mid-40s actually. Methyl bromide. Atmospheric concentrations of methyl bromide have not declined since 2016. You can see they've kind of flattened out in the top panel there. A majority of the anthropogenically produced methyl bromide has been phased out. That's the green line that you could see, and there's the red line. That's the quarantine and pre-shipment, the QPS emissions. So natural emissions are now the dominant source, but the reported QPS consumption of about 10,000 tons has been stable for more than 2 decades. So there still is room to control methyl bromide. Around 40% of that QPS could be phased out with non-methyl bromide alternatives. And if Ian Porter is still in the room, he owes me a beer for having said that. Oops, sorry. I talked about emissions. I talked about the levels of chlorine in the stratosphere. That's the upper panel, and you can see they're going down. The lower panel shows the recovery of ozone. This is a global average, almost global average, from 60 south to 60 north. So the recovery of ozone is in progress. You can see our model projection in a black line there, and then the actual observations in purple on that bottom panel. The projections are the three lines you see on the right side. The blue line is if you had strong greenhouse gas controls. The orange line is more moderate, and the red line is pretty much a business as usual. If CO2, methane, N2O continue to increase, you will get a stronger response of ozone. So the recovery of ozone is highly dependent on these greenhouse gases. And there's really a lot of concern now about how climate change will impact levels of tropical total column ozone. Stratospheric ozone depletion and climate change are linked issues. The recovery and increases in greenhouse gases will be key to the future Southern Hemisphere climate change. The global and middle upper stratosphere is cooling at a rate of about 0.6 Kelvin or 0.6 Celsius per decade, and that is driven by changing carbon dioxide and stratospheric ozone. So temperatures are cooling in the upper stratosphere and quite substantially. Greenhouse gases and the effect of ozone recovery will have opposing effects on temperature and the circulation in the future. And the calculated total, just to get to radiative forcing, the calculated total radiative forcing due to CFCs, HCFCs, halons, carbon, TET, and methylchloroform decreased by about 0.006 watts per meter squared since 2016. And this forcing is about 16% of the CO2 radiative forcing. So just to compare all the gases that are controlled here, that's a substantial fraction. And finally, the declining ODS emissions avoids additional warming of about half to 1 K by mid-century compared to a world avoided of steadily increasing ODS increases with resulting ozone changes. So that's also a very positive outcome. Just in terms of ozone trends, the observations show that in the upper stratosphere, ozone is increasing. So that's a very good result. Observations and models are really in quite good agreement. You can see the blue shading in the blue line. They overlap almost exactly with that red line. That's a very good finding. As I already mentioned, the upper stratosphere continues to cool, and models, actually we can dissect those models and show that stratospheric ozone is, the increase is due both to the ODS decline and to the CO2 increase, which is cooling things off. Well, not everything is right in the world. The observations and the models tend to disagree in the lower stratosphere. So the models suggest there should be increases, but the observations actually show there's still some decreases of ozone. This is not well understood, and so it's for the 2026 assessment to maybe solve. And finally, at the OEWG, I remarked that scientists were quite concerned about what the Hunga Tonga volcanic eruption would do, and so I'm going to update you a little bit here. Just to state straight up, the ozone hole is caused by chlorofluorocarbons and halons, and the models projected that the 2023 hole would be a little bit worse. So back in July, I said, we got to watch this. But the early actually the early observations back when I spoke in July, they were showing some impact on the ozone hole. It turned out, though, that Mother Nature worked in our favor. This year was a relatively active weather situation over Antarctica, and so the 2023 ozone hole was only modest. It was still there, it was still a good-sized ozone hole, but not an extreme. And the plot I show here shows the size, the area coverage of the ozone hole, and the red line is what 2023 was. You can see there was a lot of ozone holes in the past years that were bigger. 2023 was the 16th largest. So it was a big ozone hole. It's caused by chlorofluorocarbons. We were concerned about Hunga Tonga, but it turned out that it was a pretty modest 16th. And you can see that there's a gentle trend downward in the size of the ozone hole. So this is also pretty good news. We were worried about this past summer, but that didn't play out. So I have to pick on my modeling buddies. They didn't quite get it right this year. So with that, I'm going to pass the baton over here to Paul Barnes. Paul.
Thank you, Paul. I want to just point out that Paul and I share a first name, but I'm not Paul's replacement, and I don't have Paul's charisma and communication skills, so just bear with me here. But anyway, I want to give you just some highlights from EAP's findings, so I'm speaking on behalf of my other co-chairs and panel members. Straight up, there's continuing mounting evidence that the Montreal Protocol is contributing to environmental sustainability and human health and well-being in a number of ways. And with respect to the UN Sustainable Development Goals, the Montreal Protocol, as we've assessed it, are really contributing to targets in quite a number of these SDGs, particularly in the areas of climate change, human health, air and water quality, contaminants and pollution, biodiversity and ecosystems, and food production and security. With respect to human health, just to highlight some recent updated studies, modeling studies done by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency and collaborating scientists, these models have estimated that because of the Montreal Protocol, 11 million cases of melanoma, which is the deadly form of skin cancer, have been avoided for those born in the U.S. During the period 1890 to 2100. And these are for cases over the lifetime of individuals. In addition, over 400 million cases of the less deadly forms of skin cancer, basal cell carcinoma and squamous cell carcinoma, have been avoided as well. In that study, they also found that 63 million cases of cataracts, which are the leading cause of blindness globally, have been avoided for people in that cohort as well. And it's worth pointing out that from a human health perspective, UV radiation also has some beneficial effects, notably vitamin D production and improve immune system functions. This requires exposure to moderate levels of solar UV radiation, and this has allowed people to spend time outside and therefore gain benefits from some of these positive effects of UV that may not have been possible without the Montreal Protocol. In terms of solar UV and climate benefits, as Paul noted, because of the effect of the Montreal Protocol and protecting the ozone layer, we have avoided large increases in surface solar ultraviolet B radiation. Those increases would have been highest in the polar regions, where models suggest that by 2065, the UV index at midsummer in Antarctic and the Antarctic would have been 33 compared to a normal 3. So a tenfold increase in UV index that would have occurred without the Montreal Protocol. And another benefit that is the result of some modeling studies that showed that with these really high UV levels that would have occurred without the Montreal Protocol, this would have had significant negative effects on plants, and in particular, the ability of plants to absorb carbon dioxide through the process of photosynthesis. This would have in turn had the effect of increasing carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere, which would have further contributed to surface warming on the order of a half to a full degree C by the end of the century. One of the things that's happening increasingly is that the UV radiation on the ground and the UV radiation received by organisms is increasingly being affected by climate change. And in particular, extreme events of climate and weather are not only disrupting human and ecological systems, but they're having a significant effect on the UV exposures that these organisms receive. There's a growing concern about the production and the accumulation of plastic waste in the environment. And we know that solar ultraviolet radiation is a primary driver of the breakdown and degradation of plastics. This degradation, coupled with the physical breakdown of products, leads to the production of microplastics in the environment, which are increasing in many cases. However, although we know that this is happening, we still don't really know the risk biologically, and so there's a lot of uncertainty about the significance of this problem. One area that we've paid particular attention to is the production of trifluoroacetic acid, or TFA, which is a breakdown product of the CFC replacements, HFCs, HFOs, and HCFCs. What happens is that in the atmosphere, these compounds are broken down by ultraviolet radiation and produce TFA. TFA is soluble in water, and so it is in rainwater that precipitates and accumulates on land and in the oceans. The concern is that TFA is very persistent and potentially toxic to organisms. The source of TFA is, as we indicated, these replacement chemicals, but that's not the only source of TFA. There are other applications where TFA is a byproduct, for example, from fluorinated compounds used in the pharmaceutical industry and in pesticides can produce TFA, as well as in chemical feedstocks. The amount of TFA from those sources is highly uncertain. Once TFA is formed, it in the atmosphere, it occurs in rainwater, and once on land, it forms salts with alkali metals, particularly sodium, potassium, and calcium. And in this form, it does accumulate, but it's very unreactive in this form. And if ingested by animals, it's easily excreted. Therefore, it doesn't bioaccumulate like certain toxins. The one exception might be plants, where it can accumulate over time. So these TFA salts do not accumulate in the food chain. It's expected that TFA in the atmosphere will increase due to the increased use of HFOs and HCFOs for cooling purposes. But the concentrations of TFA in the environment remain very low and are expected to remain low even with this increased production. And the concentrations are far, far, far below the levels that would have toxic effect on organisms. Nonetheless, we urge caution in the sense that continued monitoring and assessment of this is advised so we can keep up to date on the potential biological consequences. We recognize that there are a number of challenges as a panel that we face in trying to assess the interactive effects of changes in solar UVA radiation with climate on human health, food security, ecosystem health, and biodiversity. In many cases, we just lack information. For example, we don't really have many studies that really provide any information on how UV, together with climate change, will affect biodiversity. We don't have a lot of good information on how UV, combined with all of these other things that are changing simultaneously with climate change, like drought, like high temperatures and those sorts of things, how those things all together affect the environment. And so we also don't know, or we lack the studies really to project how changes that we may see in an experimental setting, small scale, really scale up to regional and global effects. So those kind of modeling studies are rather rare and limited. So how things will play out in the future are really unknown, and that limits our ability to really come up with robust assessments on how these changes will play out in the future. So with that, I'll turn it over to Martin.
Thank you, Paul. It gives me great pleasure to present some key messages from the TEEP. As you will see, we cover a variety of sectors, but as the other panel co-chairs have explained, we do keep a very close communication, ensuring that our work is well integrated. I'll first refer to the foam sector and fire protection. From foam blowing agents, the key message is that transitions to zeros and depleting potential and low global warming potential foam blowing agent alternatives to HCFCs continue to progress. With respect to fire protection, halons continue to be needed for enduring uses, for example, oil and gas, nuclear power plants, military, civil aviation, the last of which is growing. Halon supply beyond 2030 is potentially compromised, with halon emissions higher than previously predicted. Referring to chemical substances, this is a wide group of substances. CFCs have been phased out worldwide. That is excellent news. HCFC 22 phase-out is complete in non-A5 parties and progressing well in A5 parties. Regarding feedstock, HCFC feedstock use is increasing. CTC feedstock is increasing due to HFO production. Manufacture of HCFC 22 generates high GWP HFC 23 as a byproduct. We have been speaking about that with this week. Emissions are greater than 0.1% that would be expected with implemented controls. Manufacture of semiconductors, electronics, magnesium, all of these use high GWP HFCs. Controls can reduce HFC emissions. Inhalers for asthma and chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, commonly known as COPD. There is a transition from high GWP HFCs. This is well underway, but is a major undertaking with serious potential public health risks. Going on to the refrigeration, air conditioning, heat pumps, ultra-low, low, and/or medium GWP alternative refrigerants are now available for all RAC HP sectors. There are challenges in finding the optimal solution for each application, considering especially the cost of the refrigerant, the energy efficiency rating, safety, and ease of use. There is no magic or silver bullet, if you like. Accessibility is a major hindrance for the wide-scale adoption and progress towards HFC phase-down. Revisions of safety standards has enabled increased use of flammable refrigerants in many applications, but the expanding use of flammable refrigerants in A5 parties requires support for training and capacity building. Proposed broad PFAS regulations limit the use of HFOs. This could impact the HFC phase-down. With respect to energy efficiency, the HFC phase-down focuses on direct greenhouse emissions from the RAC HP sector. Indirect greenhouse emissions due to energy consumption are much more impactful on climate change. RAC HP and direct greenhouse emissions can be reduced significantly through improved equipment energy efficiency, reduced demand using high-performance buildings and cold chain, and reduced carbon intensity of the electricity network. Speaking about servicing, in most A5 parties, but especially in low and very low volume consuming countries, the majority of ODS and HFC refrigerants are used for the rack HP servicing. Restricting the growth of products containing high GWP and energy inefficient rack HP equipment would reduce the servicing tail of unwanted high GWP refrigerants. Ensuring support for proper training of servicing and recovery would reduce direct emissions of ODS and HFC refrigerants and also reduce indirect emissions from the loss in energy efficiency through proper maintenance of rack HP equipment. Effective management of banks of controlled substances can minimize global impacts. This comprises recovery, reuse, recycling, reclamation, and destruction of banks, mainly in the rack HP and the foams. ODS banks have been more concentrated in non-A5 parties. HFC banks are currently evenly distributed between non-A5 and A5 parties. Banks in non-A5 parties will rapidly reach the end of life over the next decade. Banks are declining in non-A5 parties and rapidly increasing with HFCs in equipment in A5 parties. These are all important consideration points. So to round off our presentation, I would like to leave with you 3 quick but very important key messages. The first one is the Montreal Protocol is working for both the ozone layer and climate. ODS emissions have declined substantially. And the third one, accessibility and implementation of HFC alternatives in A5 parties will be critical for further progress. With that, we close our presentations. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you very much. I really thank co-chairs of the assessment panels for their excellent presentation of the synthesis report on the 2022 quadrennial assessment, and congratulations for carrying out of excellent work and efforts on protection of ozone layer. I'm glad that we could hear good news and success stories that ODS emissions are declining, and we also could hear about how much our protocol is contributing to climate, that the ozone layer is recovering, but still it's pretty much in function of GHG concentration. And yeah, we also have seen how Montreal Protocol is contributing to different SDGs. So these are really some great news, but we also know and we are aware about remaining challenges ahead of us. And I would like to open the floor for a short session of questions and answers. So the floor is open for the parties for questions to the distinguished co-chairs of the assessment panels. Okay, Guinea, European. Okay, so I can see that for the following parties asked for the floor: Guinea, European Union, United States of America, and Argentina. So Guinea, you have the floor.
Merci.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Madam President, I would like to sincerely thank you and to thank all of these groups which have given us such very, very fruitful reports, SAPTEEP and EAP. The issue relating to ozone-depleting substances is fundamental, of course, to the Montreal Protocol, which concerns all parties and all those seeking to implement the Montreal Protocol, we would like to sincerely thank you for all of the efforts that have been made in this area. I would like to recall the results of the research. These research results have shown that in terms of domestic sources, it's relating to this soil chlorine. This is transmitted and is eliminated into the atmospheric pressure, and it does not reach great quantities. But my question is the following: this small quantity, has it been assessed? If the answer is yes, what is the percentage that has been noted? And if not, given the proliferation of unities of production which are excessive, this quantity, which is currently small, might become much larger, since we know that ozone depleting substances are long-lived. We would like to ask the Secretariat to look further into these chlorine sources which could have such a negative effect in the future. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Guinea, for asking your question. And now I will give the floor to European Union.
Okay, sorry. Thank you, Madam President, and congratulations with your nomination. Looking forward to work with you in the coming days and year. The EU thanks the assessment panels for the comprehensive assessment and huge amount of work carried out. And once again, we want to thank the presenter of the SAP report today for his great contributions, extensive knowledge, and his interesting ways to communicate clearly with us. That was much appreciated, and we wish you good luck. The very comprehensive and useful information of the Cardinal report has led to many new conference papers, which we are actually discussing at present. And the EU strongly welcomes this. It underlines again the importance of science for this protocol. We look forward to receive similar information in the future, and we are at present finalizing the terms of reference for the next Cardinal assessment report. Our question to the panel would be where they see further need to study PFAS and the effects on the environment and health, given their persistence and the near possibility to get them out of the environment once they're there. For instance, elements where, from the side of the EU, we think there are data gaps for further study are the accumulation in certain freshwater environments, including drinking water reservoirs, or the potential impacts from chronic exposures, even at low levels. A second issue relates to new climate alternatives for metered-dose inhalers. And the third speaker today actually had that also very presently in her slides. The TIAP alerted to us that these alternatives are available, but that we need to be careful with making sure how we can make the transition to these alternatives. We already raised this also in the OEWG in Bangkok earlier this year. In the EU, several manufacturers will start introducing them from 2025 onwards, and we understand that the aim would be to achieve a full conversion by 2030. Our domestic policy will include MDIs in the quota system from 2025 onwards, and we see this as a significant driver for such change. But that does not mean that we need to not engage with the stakeholders concerned to make sure that the transition goes as smooth as possible. And that has a global angle too. That is why we have been engaging in bilateral discussions with some parties here in the margins regarding a conference room paper on this topic that we are contemplating. Based on what the assessment panel reports tell us, and in particular the TIAP, we see issues that such a CRP could address are how to coordinate between national environmental and health authorities on MDI propellants alternatives, as well as effective approval processes for new MDI propellants with low global warming potential. to liaise with companies producing MDIs, to encourage them to seek approval for MDIs with the new propellants, and to engage with medical agencies to reach out to their counterparts in other countries to facilitate approval processes. Given the limited time available to us here in Nairobi and the many issues we already were discussing, as well as the need for parties to be able to consult on this issue with the relevant players at the national level, we have decided not to introduce this CRP during the preparatory segment this year. We would have, however, like to ask the Secretariat to include this item on the agenda of the OEWG next year so that we can discuss this important issue with all parties in detail. Thank you.
Thank you very much, European Union, for your intervention and for informing us about your plans with the relevant CRP. Now I will give floor to United States of America, and would like to announce that we have also Argentina, Peru, and Norway, and would like to ask parties if there are more to let us know so that we can conclude the list of parties for the question and answer session. So, United States, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President, and congratulations on your election. The United States would like to express our sincere thanks to the TEEP, SAP, and EEAP for their quadrennial assessment reports, the synthesis report, and today's very informative presentation. We appreciate the efforts of the panels to collaborate to provide an up-to-date and consistent set of materials to the parties. The United States continues in its earnest support of the continuation of the invaluable work of all three panels. These informative reports are a testament to the hard work of all the scientists and experts on the panels. We do not have further questions at this time, given the robust dialogue at the Open-Ended Working Group in Bangkok this year, which led to fruitful discussions and provided critical information to the ongoing negotiations on a number of topics at this meeting, including on stratospheric aerosol injection, HFC 23 emissions, and atmospheric monitoring. Thank you again to the membership of all three panels.
Thank you very much, United States of America. At this point, I would like to give a chance to co-chairs of assessment panel to reflect on what has been raised by parties, and then we will continue our question and answer session.
Thank you for the very kind compliments on our work. I first would like to address the question from Guinea. Thank you, Delegate. And it was about concerning surface emissions of chlorine and bromine compounds. And I can give a quick answer that there are emissions of natural compounds from soils and from biological processes in the ocean, in particular methyl chloride, bromoform, and dibromomethane. And the answer is yes, these are very carefully looked at. We consider methyl chloride is a natural compound, and it is in fact the major natural compound for the ozone layer and for chlorine. So that has been carefully looked at over the years, and in fact we measure levels of methyl chloride in the atmosphere, and that is reported in the assessment. In previous assessments, we have looked at other sources of chlorine, potential sources, surface sources of chlorine, in particular sodium chloride, sea salt. But sea salt is very water soluble, and you don't really see it very high above the Earth's surface. And in measurements that we've made at very high altitudes, you really do not see sodium chloride. So if anybody asks you about, you know, is my swimming pool with chlorine in it causing ozone depletion, the answer is no. It just doesn't get up very high. Also, the bromine compounds that are emitted from the surface, we've looked at those very carefully. A third thing is volcanic eruptions and what the HCl they might possibly put into the stratosphere. That's also very, very carefully looked at. So I hope that answers your question. I think the next question was from the EU on, and I think there's two parts to that. One is the issue of PFAS. Paul, can you take that?
Yes, in response to the question about PFAS and should it be part of the TOR for EAP, first of all, I think it's worth noting that PFAS is a large category that includes a huge diversity of chemical structures, sizes, modes of actions, and potential toxicity. So it's a very, very diverse group of chemicals, and as we noted in our most recent assessment, we do not, as a panel, recommend lumping things together from an assessment perspective into this one category. It needs to be much more targeted into specific compounds of interest and so on, but as a blanket category, there's little sort of scientific basis for looking at that as a category itself. So I would, kind of refer the EU delegate back to our chapter in our recent assessment on that. But that's our recommendation at this point, is that it's a huge category, and without further guidance in terms of specific types of PFAS chemicals, broadly looking at them, it is there's little scientific evidence to suggest that they should be treated as a single category of compounds.
Thanks very much, and thank you very much to the European Union for the question on MDIs. So you might say, why are we so interested in MDIs? I'm interested because on Monday I'll be in my clinic with patients taking them. That's pretty important. And we are in a partnership with patients, and let me tell you, the patients are absolutely focused on the environmental impact of their MDIs. So when I say that 70–80% of all inhalers are blue inhalers that people use to relieve their asthma, I'm not sure you're aware, but one of those inhalers is equivalent in carbon footprint terms to 300 kilometers in a family car. So it is not trivial. In the United Kingdom, the inhalers are something like 14% of the entire National Health Service footprint for direct patient care. And so we should be doing something about this, and therefore we should look at the alternatives. There are not in-kind alternatives to MDIs, powder inhalers, which are satisfactory for many patients and available now. If you say to patients, would you like to switch? 80% of patients would say they would like to switch, providing the inhalers suitable for them, on environmental grounds. So then we come to the conversion from the current hydrofluorocarbon 134A to the new proposed propellants, and there are two. There's an HFO, and I think the majority of the companies are looking at 152A, which has something like 10% of the carbon footprint of the current inhalers. So a number of companies are moving forward. The logistics of the supply chain is tricky for a number of reasons. First, there's a single company that supplies almost all manufacturers of MDIs in the whole world with pharmaceutical grade regulated 134A. So by accident or catastrophe, there could be a supply chain issue, and switching over from one to the other is complex. That's why we say we need to keep an eye on this, because there could be public health issues if we didn't watch this conversion carefully. Two companies, I think, have said that they will have the first MDIs regulated for use and on sale in 2025. I think that's very optimistic. It may be true, but it's optimistic, and it's likely to be a bit slower for me. But when I tell you that we have to have a broader view that takes also developed and developing countries into account, there are now 60 pharmaceutical manufacturers in the world who will need to switch over their inhalers, or because they won't be able to get the current propellant, or stop manufacturing. So there'll be some rationalization here. It's possible that the costs of inhalers will go up. So I think it is a complex issue. I welcome the potential CRP from the European Union to alert parties that there is an upcoming issue we need to watch carefully. If you remember last time when we phased out CFCs, I thought it might take 2 or 3 years. I was superbly optimistic. I think it took 20 years to phase out CFCs from inhalers. But it is an important issue. We mustn't adversely affect patient health. It has to be a win-win for the environment and for the patients. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you very much, all the members of assessment panels. I think that provides the answers raised to the questions raised so far. And now I have on the list Argentina, Peru, and Norway. I had also Turkmenistan, but apparently they gave up. So Argentina, you have the floor.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, President. And allow me to congratulate you on your election. Well, first of all, I would like to thank our colleagues for their presentations. Argentina has a specific question. We'd like to know if you have plans in the next reports to carry out a concrete assessment of the impact of what the various panelists are asking to do with regards to HFO with relation to PFAS. And this is linked to one aspect and a problem in reality, is that many Latin American countries have already expressed during past meetings of the parties, and our delegation in particular, during the open-ended working group meeting held in Bangkok recently, relating to the issues of the provision with regards to alternatives. And this has led to our country almost being in non-compliance and facing a reduction in financing during the last meeting of the Executive Committee in terms of funds for Step 2 in fixed consumption, in order to have anticipated phase down of HCFC and funding from the Multilateral Fund. So for us it will be very important that in the next reports we include a specific study on what I just mentioned at first. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Argentina, for your question. And now I would like to give floor to Peru. Peru, you have the floor.
Buenos días con todos.
Good afternoon, everybody. Since it's the first time that our delegation is taking the floor in this meeting, we would like to thank the government of Kenya and its people, and thank the Secretariat for their work, for the preparatory work, and also congratulate you, President, on your election, and congratulate the Bureau as well. I'd also like to thank the experts who have said that a reduction in the size of the ozone layer is linked to compliance with the Montreal Protocol and the Paris Agreement. Therefore, we would like to ask how this information, which you have presented to us today, is being taken into account for forecasts and modelling of compliance with the Paris Agreement, and whether that information is taken into account, for example, in drafting the evaluation reports of the IPCC, whose report was recently published as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peru, for your question. And I have Norway, so Norway, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President, and congratulations with your nomination. We thank the three experts panels for their clear presentation and efforts in compiling in the synthesis report the great amount of information that they have been providing us during the course of this year. Among the several issues that our experts choose to highlight in their synthesis report, we would like to emphasize a couple of them. The first issue we want to highlight is related to exempted uses. We see a clear pattern that exempted uses under the Montreal Protocol, such as feedstock uses or methyl bromide for quarantine and shipment uses, bring major challenges to this body. We are concerned that the achievements and success of the Montreal Protocol that has been pursued through targeted actions for phasing out controlled substances will soon fall in the shadow of a problem that we have let grow bigger and bigger during the last decade. We believe it is timely to ask ourselves what we are really doing here and how we can take back on track a situation that seems to be out of control. Every party and stakeholder should take responsible choices, and we use the use of alternatives that are available and accessible in all sectors and applications where controlled substances are used, even where those are exempted under the Montreal Protocol. Regarding feedstock uses and generation of byproducts during chemical processes, there is enough evidence in the literature that the challenge is huge. Even facilities in countries with the most stringent control measures seems to have emissions of several CFC and HFC that go under the radar, below the radar. That is demonstrating the complex and tremendous task in front of us. We encourage parties to get together and find appropriate solutions to strengthen the regime for monitoring, reporting, and verifying productions, emissions, and consumption data under which the Montreal Protocol operates. We cannot afford to wait another assessment report in 4 years from now, showing us that we failed to tackle the major challenge of industrial emissions. Turning to the second issue that we would like to highlight. As we just heard, TFA is a breakdown product of several HFC, HFO, HCFOs, and others, and the formation of TFA in the atmosphere is expected to increase in the coming decades due to increased use of HFOs and HCFOs. Although we do not know all possible environmental or health effects of these substances, we know more than enough to be very concerned. TFA is one of the PFAS substances, also called forever chemicals, meaning that once it is released into the environment, it will not go away. There is mounting evidence from recent studies that the concentration of TFA in fresh waters, drinking water, as well as in tree leaves, have considerably increased over the last decades. This should be a matter of great concern. The Montreal Protocol is succeeding in phasing out the ozone-depleting substances, and we are well on our way to phasing down HFCs, contributing to the efforts globally to limit global warming. We have concerns that while transitioning away from HFCs, we create a new environmental problem. We think that it is timely that we as parties should carefully assess the consequences of which alternative to HFC that we choose to transition away, and tackle all environmental and climate effects in a broad context into consideration. We should do our utmost to use alternatives where possible in order to minimize the release of those substances into the environment at the extent possible. Several countries around the world have recently taken initiative to closer assess which option would be the best suitable for managing the risks associated to those forever chemicals. We would like to point out that it is important that our expert panels continue to inform us about how those regulatory developments could affect and challenge different areas of work under the Montreal Protocol. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you very much, Norway, for expressing your position and concerns. And at this point, I would like to give the floor to co-chairs of the assessment panels to reflect on the issues raised by Argentina, Peru, and Norway. And if any other party wish to take a floor for the questions, I'm calling because we have to close the list of speakers.
Thank you, delegates, for the questions. First, I'll address the distinguished delegate from Argentina and their question about the impact of HFOs with respect to PFASs. And I will remark that right now the terms of reference for the 2026 assessment is being formulated. And in fact, I think that these are excellent points that are being made and should be included within the TOR. So if you're asking us if we're going to work on that, the answer will be yes, but you need to ask in the TOR, and that's great. So I hope that answers that question. The question from the distinguished delegate from Peru was with regard to taking into account into modeling of ozone-depleting substances, hydrofluorocarbons, hydrochlorofluorocarbons. And the answer to that is yes, indeed. We do work with IPCC. We, in fact, in our modeling of the atmosphere, we use their shared socioeconomic pathways. So they project where CO2 is going, where methane is going, where nitrous oxide is going. And we do use those numbers from IPCC. We also give them our ozone depletion estimates that they can put into models, also the CFC estimates and the HCFC and HFC estimates. In fact, Dr. Velders is behind me, who generates a lot of those numbers. They go directly to IPCC. So we coordinate with them on what we report on, and they coordinate with us on what they plan to report on. So yes, we do engage with them quite heavily, and I think to the profit of both IPCC and the Montreal Protocol. But yes, we model together. A lot of the models that we use are the same ones that are used in IPCC and vice versa. In fact, we add the stratospheric chemistry dimension to IPCC. So all the scientific work to model the ozone layer feeds into IPCC quite prominently. So thank you for that question. I hope that answers that. And the two questions from Norway. Ashley, can you take the first part?
Thanks very much. I think some of what Norway said was a statement rather than a question. I think that's fair. She did ask a question, I think, a sort of comment about some substances which deplete the ozone layer, which are still not fully controlled. who don't have, what about the non-controlled uses, and methyl bromide was cited. I mean, we're a technology and economic assessment panel. That's our job, is to flag issues to you, and then it's for parties to come to consensus on whether or not it's timely to put the effort in behind those issues. For example, we have flagged that QPS uses of methyl bromide, some of them could have alternatives, and so we support, by science, I hope, and by review, the parties in making their decisions. We do not do policy. Thank you.
So this is in response to the second part, I think, of Norway's question about TFA. Just to clarify that we do argue that we should continue to monitor the TFA issue, again, because of the persistence of these chemicals in the environment. We have noted, increases in concentrations in certain pools of these in the environment, but just to point out that the differences in the concentrations, even with those increases that exist in the environment, as opposed to concentrations that actually have toxic effects, are in the order of 3 to 5 orders of magnitude. So, I mean, the concentrations could double, triple, quadruple in the environment, and they're still going to be off the charts in terms of, not concentrations that are known to have toxicological effects. So not to say that to minimize those concerns, but that's the magnitude of the difference between what's in the environment versus what is known at this point to have toxic effect on organisms. So we certainly agree that this should be continued and monitored in the assessment, but that's just putting things in some context that might be helpful as well. So, thank you.
Thank you very much for providing the answers to issues raised by Argentina, Peru, and Norway. And now on my list I have Lesotho and Norway. So Lesotho, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and congratulations to the outgoing Chair and Biru, and welcome and congratulations to your new chairship and your Biru. Thank you for the presentation made by the experts, an excellent presentation. And in this MOP35, an important issue for leadership is the gap between turning scientific knowledge into leadership action to address the set challenges of ozone depletion, HCFS, and other emissions and pollutions. For me, the presentation was highly technical. And although I could not grasp some of the concepts, we know that the end of this work is leadership bringing change to our environment. One of these complexities exemplified by one of the presenters was the question of ultraviolet radiation and its yet unknown interactions with HCFs and other environmental elements. Our question is now, what can be done to minimize gaps in what we know and provide leadership among our party states under the Montreal Protocol to address the identified problems? And what is the role of youth and higher education, academia, under the Montreal Protocol, especially in Africa, to address this problem? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Lesotho, for your intervention. And now I would like to give floor to Norway and to call for other parties, because if they want to take a floor, to do it now, to let us know. Otherwise, I will conclude the list. Norway, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President, and my apologies for coming back. I felt that the experts were maybe asking a response from Norway, so that's why I take the opportunity to take the floor. And yes, our intervention were more based on general comments that we wanted to share, and it was not a question to the experts. And apologies if I was not clear with that. Sure, we would like the experts to continue to inform the parties through their reports, compiling the information. We believe that there will be development of scientific studies in the years to come on this matter, and we really would like the panel to strive to compile all the information out there, and also take into consideration that there's many approaches depending on the region of the world, how they want to assess those substances, how they should be regulated. And we're not asking the panels to be policy prescriptive, but to have the broader range of information for us to be able to be well informed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Norway, for fully clarifying your position. And now I would like to turn to assessment panel if they would like to reflect to the what has been expressed by Delegate of Lesotho.
Thank you to the distinguished delegate from Lesotho. It was a very eloquent statement of what we think is a necessity to bring forward young people to be both leaders and scientific experts. I think all of us up here who are co-chairs have a lot of people to thank for our educations. We had teachers, we had leaders that we followed, and I acknowledge that, and I am deeply grateful for the people who have helped me over my career. So thank you for acknowledging that we have to start with young people to bring them up, and I just want to emphasize the value of education. And that's good for us as a body because we have not finished the job of repairing the ozone layer, and we have not dealt sufficiently with the issue of climate. And so we need young people, in fact, to be educated, to come up here and to take these jobs that we have in the coming decades. So thank you for that comment. There are a number of efforts in scientific societies to bring forward young people, to help people in their early careers, to promote graduate students, to bring people into universities, advanced graduate students. And we need them if we're going to continue to monitor the atmosphere and ensure that what you have done policy-wise here actually happens in our atmosphere. So thank you for that statement and the question.
Thank you very much, Mr. Paul Newman, for for this comment, which is excellent closure, actually, for this agenda item, yeah, and what has been raised by distinguished delegate of Lesotho. I don't see more requests for the floor, and with this, I will consider that we can close this agenda item. Once more, I would like to express sincere appreciation to the co-chairs and the members of assessment panel for their excellent work, and would like to call all delegates, if they have any further questions, they have chance to use to take advantage of your presence till the end of this meeting. If you have any further need for the clarification, and now we can conclude consideration of this item. Thanks a lot once more. And this brings us to our agenda item 5, which is presentation by the Chair of Executive Committee of the Multilateral Fund for the implementation of the Montreal Protocol on the work of the Executive Committee, Multilateral Fund Secretariat, and funds implementing agencies. I now invite the Chair of the Executive Committee, Ms. Annie Gabriel, to make a presentation on the work of the Executive Committee, Multilateral Fund Secretariat, and funds implementing agencies. Ms. Gabriel, you have the floor.
Madam President, distinguished parties, on behalf of the Executive Committee of the Multilateral Fund, it is my honour to report to the parties the major strides made by the Executive Committee since the 34th meeting of parties in 2022. First, I am pleased to report that the Executive Committee has made considerable progress towards implementing the Kigali amendment this year, especially in the refrigeration servicing sector, responding to the mandate provided to the Executive Committee when parties adopted the Kigali Amendment in 2016. Second, the Committee has established 2 funding windows on energy efficiency and disposal, and is developing an operational plan to consider energy efficiency while phasing down HFCs. This is again in response to the mandate provided to the Executive Committee when the Kigali Amendment was adopted. Third, the Committee reiterated the importance we place on institutional strengthening by increasing its funding level, consistent with expectations from parties arising from adoption of the Kigali Amendment. Fourth, we have adopted specific project requirements and indicators to ensure that gender mainstreaming is an important focus in implementation of multi-year projects. Madam President, distinguished parties, document 35.9 at this meeting provides a comprehensive and yet brief description of the deliberations and the outcomes of the Committee's work in the last year, the projects approved, the status of implementation of ongoing projects, as well as business planning, financial and administrative matters. In my presentation, I will give you a snapshot of a few decisions, and I will conclude with the achievements of the Fund since its inception, achievements of which we are all proud. Oops. Oops. Okay, thank you. As I mentioned, the Executive Committee agreed on the eligible incremental costs for the refrigeration servicing sector for Stage 1 of Kigali implementation plans. This is an excellent step towards supporting developing countries to implement their HFC implementation plans and will assist more than 80 countries with only servicing sector activities to proceed with development of their plans. Implementing the first stage of the Kigali implementation plans will enable Article 5 parties to comply with the control targets of the Kigali Amendment until 2029, while countries also implement the last stage of their HCFC phase down. These funding levels will be reviewed for activities submitted under future stages of Kigali implementation plans once activities under the HFC management plans are completed. In the 92nd meeting, we have also approved the first Kigali implementation plan for Cameroon, and many more implementation plans are expected to be approved at the 93rd meeting, a month before the first compliance target of the Kigali Amendment kicks in, a very exciting period for the Executive Committee. The Committee will continue to discuss the remaining issues related to the HFC cost guidelines at its next meeting, which includes cost-effectiveness thresholds and incremental operating costs for other sectors, and the starting point for sustained aggregate reductions of HFC consumption. The Committee has also advanced its approach on dealing with energy efficiency while phasing down HFCs, an issue that is core in the deliberations of the parties in recent years. Many of us participated in the recently concluded and very successful workshop on energy efficiency that the Ozone Secretariat organised a few days ago. The Committee has agreed to open a funding window of $20 million where countries that have ratified the Kigali Amendment can submit pilot projects on energy efficiency. The first pilot projects will be reviewed in the upcoming meeting, while at the same time the committee members will discuss the operational framework to deal with energy efficiency issues while phasing down HFCs in a more systematic way and with policy guidance. The committee also agreed on a set of criteria and a funding window for national inventories for banks of controlled substances and a plan for the collection, transport and disposal of unwanted controlled substances. The national inventories and plans will allow countries to look for environmentally sound and sustainable ways of managing the disposal of these substances. One of the more unique aspects of the multilateral fund is the support provided to Article 5 countries through institutional strengthening projects. This support helps them to implement the protocol and its amendments. With the adoption of the Kigali Amendment, the workload of national ozone units has increased simultaneously as they reach the peak of work in their HCFC phase-out. Recognising this increased burden, the Executive Committee decided to streamline and standardise reporting requirements and increase funding to support the additional work at a level of 38% higher than that which had been agreed before, with a minimum level of institutional strengthening of US $60,000 per year. In the same decision, these projects were extended to 3 years to reduce the administrative burden on national ozone officers. The committee also delivered on its promise to ensure that from planning until implementation on the ground, gender issues are considered and included in every stage of projects. Bilateral and implementing agencies will include mandatory requirements and performance indicators for gender when submitting stages of multi-year projects from 2024 onwards. Madam President, distinguished parties, the delivery on the ground is possible thanks to the amazing work of the implementing and bilateral agencies. This is the time where all parties can thank the contributions of UNEP, UNDP, UNIDO and the World Bank. UNEP supported 103 countries with institutional strengthening projects and assisted them to meet their HCFC phase-out commitments through HPMPs, Information Clearinghouse products and compliance assistance activities. UNEP is supporting 51 countries in the preparation of their Kigali implementation plans and has begun implementing a twinning project for national ozone units and energy efficiency officials. UNDP is providing technical support to 47 countries to meet their HCFC targets. The HFC demonstration projects in Bangladesh, China, Dominican Republic and Mexico were completed and led to the development of highly efficient refrigeration equipment. UNDP has received approvals for HFC preparation in 30 countries and has supported 13 countries to prepare and submit Kigali implementation plans to the 92nd and 93rd meetings this year. Gender was an important priority in 2022, and UNDP implemented several strategies which increased women's participation in courses and in awareness activities. UNIDO is currently implementing HPMPs in 63 countries, institutioning projects in 12 countries, and projects on HFC 23 byproduct emission destruction in 2 countries. 3 HFC investment projects in Argentina, Lebanon and Mexico have been completed, and 2 more in Ecuador and Jordan are ongoing. At the 91st meeting, UNIDO submitted the first Kigali implementation plan for Niger, and the Executive Committee approved initial funding. At the 92nd meeting, UNIDO submitted the Kigali implementation plan for Cameroon, which was the first ever approved Kigali implementation plan. KIPs have been submitted to the upcoming, more KIPs, will be submitted to the upcoming meeting in December. UNIDO continues to submit energy efficiency projects for low-volume consuming countries and non-low-volume consuming countries, and preparation of national inventories for banks of waste-controlled substances. The World Bank continues to assist its partner countries in delivering stage 2 of their HCFC phase-out plans to achieve HFC consumption and production reductions in accordance with their obligations, and to sustain and even further reduce consumption and production towards the 2025 target. The World Bank is also supporting its partner countries in meeting their first commitments under the Kigali Amendment, while maximising climate mitigation co-benefits across key economic sectors through sustainable cooling. This year, the Bank fully resumed the on-ground country support after the COVID disruption. I would like to end my remarks by drawing your attention to the communication tool on the achievements of the Multilateral Fund that has been prepared by the Multilateral Fund Secretariat. These achievements pay tribute to the dedication, passion and commitment of all parties since 1991. There is a lot of information in the pages of the communication tool. In close collaboration with its partners, the Multilateral Fund has invested $4 billion in more than 9,000 targeted ozone recovery projects over the last 30 years. The work of the Multilateral Fund has been transforming economies and empowering people. The Fund has been investing in technology transfer, training and capacity building. New business opportunities are created and technological innovation is spurred in countries across the globe, creating new jobs and improving livelihoods. The Montreal Protocol has kept the climate cooler by nearly eliminating all ozone-depleting substances that are also greenhouse gases. Our future activities to phase down HFCs will have a bigger impact on the global climate. Our work continues to be vital to the health of the planet and its people. We are at the halfway point in the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals, and the work of the Fund contributes greatly to the achievement of these goals. I encourage you to share this communication tool so we can all be proud of our achievements. Madam President, distinguished delegates, finally, I would like to express my sincere appreciation to the members of the Executive Committee, the Fund Secretariat and the bilateral and implementing agencies for their continued hard work and dedication to our common goals. I would like to thank my colleague and friend, Mr. Hassan Ali Mubarak from Bahrain, as he was chair of one of the meetings of the Executive Committee since we last met, since the last meeting of the parties. I'd also like to thank the Executive Director of UNEP, Ms. Inga Anderson, for addressing the 91st meeting of the Executive Committee, for praising the work well done by the Fund, and for also reminding us of the importance of a strong funding mechanism to deliver on the protection of the ozone layer and climate change mitigation. And finally, I'd also like to thank the parties for their strong commitment to the implementation of the protocol and the guidance you provide to the Executive Committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, for your presentations and for all your hard work, you yourself and the members of Executive Committee, and for presenting the achievements that really all parties can be proud of. Congratulations once more, and for sure we should share all these achievements further to let know all the stakeholders in our countries about these achievements. So with this, I would like to conclude this agenda item and to announce that after lunch break, because we are exactly on time, perfect timing we had, and agenda item 5, statements by heads of delegations, we will start with that at 3 o'clock sharp. And hereby I would like to announce that following countries will start our afternoon session with their statements. It will be the Barbados, Spain, and Mauritius. With this, I would like to adjourn this morning session, and we will reconvene at 3 o'clock sharp. Thank you very much.